Okay, welcome back. Mixing part 2. This is the more fun part of mixing, and getting into plugins is so fun. I call it our toy box, and I'm going to show you all the plugins that I use. So you've got your levels, you've got your stereo field sorted. Now, let's talk about the 3 locations in a mix that you're going to be using plugins. 1 is your vocal chain, 2 is your time-based effects, and 3 is your mastering chain. So let's start with the first one, which is the vocal chain. If you know Pro Tools, you can see that I've turned all of my plugins off so I can show you one by one as we add them in, how it's going to affect the sound. So let's just do a quick review of signal flow, aka signal path, aka routing. The way we run our routing is very specific. So we don't overload our computer by putting these plugins on every single track. And number 2, we want our special effects, our fun effects like reverb, to be secondary and like controllable with a fader. So let me explain how all that works. So here obviously are my audio tracks. I have my IO set. The inputs don't even matter because I'm not recording to this. I record to my record track here. So once I record, by the way, just to let you know how I do it, I record here and then I drag it to the track that I want it on. I just think it's super fast rather than having to go and like change. Yeah, so I would need to go change my settings because I don't have inputs set up. I'd have to go and I'd have to like assign my input to my microphone, blah, blah, blah. So I just like having everything recorded into my record track, and then I drag it to the audio track. And then from there, where is the sound traveling? That is what signal flow is where does the sound start and where does it go? So I have my input is not relevant on this, but my output is. My output is sending out bus 1 and 2. And you can use any of the buses. They all do the same thing. A bus is just a bus. So I'm putting my first lead on bus 1 and 2. And then I have 2 vocal chains for the lead. So the first 2 go out bus 1 and 2. And then the second 2 go out 3 and 4. I do that because 3 and 4 tend to be my ad-libs. And so I just don't even want them fighting for the attention of the same plugins. So I just give them a little more space. And I do that in sets of like 6 on my backgrounds. I have 2 vocal chains for my background vocals, and those are going out 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So basically, my vocal chains, I've labeled them green. You can see these are the vocal chains for the backgrounds. Their input is set to whatever the output of the respective audio tracks are. So again, lead 1 is going out bus 1 and 2, and my vocal chain track, which I've just named like lead aux 1, so boring, is the input is 1 and 2. So this is where the bus is received. Okay, so out 1 and 2 needs to go in 1 and 2 somewhere else, or it's just going nowhere into outer space. And then you won't be able to hear anything if there's no place for this to arrive. So bus 1 and 2 is the input of my vocal chain. And then my vocal chain goes out, just stereo out 1 and 2, which is going to be my speakers, right? So just looking down the line, what's happening here? These 2 are going out 3 and 4. And they're being received in 3 and 4 on the other vocal chain. So just the A backs are going out to 5 and 6, and then the rest of them are going out 7 and 8. Why do I do that? Just in case my A backs are probably just going to be doubles of the lead, I do want them to have their own auxiliary. And then if these are most likely going to be all harmonies of each other, they're not, again, the height of the frequency spectrum, they're not going to be fighting for each other's space too much because they're singing different harmonies. So I'm totally cool with just sending them to one auxiliary vocal chain over here. This is a send. So these are the plugin inserts, but these are sends. Even though they look like the same thing, they're not the same thing. A send is different from an insert. Inserts are where you put your plugins on. Sends are what creates this fader. And then it's saying, where do you want to send it? And so I send it out bus reverb. I've named it reverb but you can also change it to bus. Let's just change my reverbs to bus 123, 124. If I go over here to my reverb auxiliary, so these are my time-based effects. My reverb is collecting on the reverb labeled bus, but I just changed it to bus 123, 124, right? Did I do that? Okay, so I send it out 123, 124, and then it's being received over here on 123, 124. I'm going to want to fix that on all of my other auxiliaries. Here's a fun quick key. If you're in Pro Tools, if you select the tracks and hit Shift Option and then do something, you will do what you're doing to just those 3 tracks. So I'm going to hit Shift Option and then click bus 1, 2, 3, 4, 123, 124. And notice it changed these ones too. So now all my reverbs are now 123, 124. So now you kind of know how that's working. What we're doing with this send is we're deciding how much of the vocal are we sending to where we're sending it to. It's a little backwards in my mind. I usually think like, how much reverb am I putting on the vocal? But that's not what's actually happening. It's how much of the vocal signal am I going to send to the reverb? And if I turn it up and down, you're going to start hearing more or less reverb. All my auxiliaries are always going to go out 1 and 2. Output 1 and 2, not bus 1 and 2. Output 1 and 2 is the speakers. Input 1 is probably your mic, right? And then your master fader is just always 100% going out 1 and 2. All right. So that was your little recap of signal flow. And now we can talk about what is on the vocal chain. So there's no set way to do it. Mixing is an art. You're allowed to do whatever you want, but I'm going to give you some best practices and tell you how I personally do it. I definitely know other people who don't do it the same way as me. If you follow me on Instagram, I've posted a few times like, do you put your de-esser at the top or at the bottom of your vocal chain? And I get different answers. So people do different things. Do you put your EQ first or your compressor first? I get different answers. So this is how I do it. So try it out. It works well on my voice. You're a different voice. So see what works for you. And hopefully just, maybe even just like copying my settings will work nicely. So I like to start with what's called a de-esser. I'm using this plugin called Sibilance Live, and that is a de-esser. You may find your de-essers under your dynamic plugins. I see Dyne 3 de-esser. Let's just go ahead and use that. That is the stock Pro Tools de-esser. We can go ahead and use that. What it's doing is it is listening for the frequency of an S, which is pretty high. I'm going to keep high only. And every time it hears what it thinks is an S, it's going to turn it down a little bit because S's tend to end up being too loud in the mix. All right, I'm going to be real with you right now. This is my approach to using pretty much any plugin ever. I always start by checking out their presets. It takes a lot of smarts to design a plugin. And then for them to also say, hey, here's probably a good setting, I'm going to trust them that they know what they're doing. So I usually set it to their default, but then I have to use my ears and see if they're correct. Now I'm seeing that their female de-esser is set to the frequency of about 7 kilohertz, so 7,000 hertz, and the range is -5. Every time my voice hits 7,000 hertz, it's going to turn it down 5 dB. Whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go? Did you notice that it actually turned it down on the H as well? Because the H probably hits the 7K. Now, another problem, sometimes it's not really hitting the right frequency. And so people tend to be like, I want to turn it down even more, turn it down even more. And then what ends up happening is when it does hit those S's, it makes you sound like you have a lisp because it turns the S down too much. And it's not the desired result. I noticed there's also a male setting, a male higher frequency setting. Look at what it's changing. Okay, so what it's doing on this setting is it's rolling off Like, see how it created this arc? So it's focusing more on the higher frequency. So basically, it's looking like it's going to try to turn down 7 and above. So let's see what it does.
How do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go? How do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Yeah, that's sounding pretty good. I think that it's turning down the S just a little baby bit, and that's all we really need. So that's the de-esser, and then I put my EQ next. All right, this is what my EQ settings look like. Yours might be different. You can check out their presets. I did start it at a vocal setting. This was their vocal setting, and then I just made my changes to how I like it. But real quick, let me show you basically what are the parameters in the EQ. EQ is going to be turning up or down frequency ranges. So this is the highs. I'm turning the highs up. It's much like an equalizer that you see in a car, you know, or on your stereo. So when we turn our high up, it'll get higher. I'll show you.
Way, where's it gonna go? How do we ever get?
So as you can see, it's just gonna turn up those frequencies when I turn them up or turn them down. Okay. So basically every EQ looks the same. It usually has like these little dots where you can pick it up and put it down. That's the frequency it's targeting. And then the shape is, notice how this is like a bigger bell curve. And then these are like a very narrow bell curve. That, this curvature or whatever is called the Q. It's always going to be called the Q. And here it says Q. So if I have my green guy selected, if I've clicked on it in Pro Q3, same with your plugin, you have to like click on one or you'll see it listed as like separate bands down here. Once you have it selected, you adjust the Q and it changes the shape of the bell curve. Right? This, when it's narrow like this, we call it a notch. Like you're notching out just a little bit. And then a kind of wide curve will turn up this middle frequency the most. And then it will also be turning up the frequencies around it, but maybe a little less, right? So that's what's happening there. You can just drag it up, or you can actually just use the gain knob, whatever you feel like doing, the frequencies up and down. That's pretty much what you're seeing. There's always like 2 ways to do things. This also changes the shape of the line. So as you can see, this one doesn't have a bell curve because it is a low cut. So with vocals, how do you EQ? What is the best practice? I would always cut some of the lows. So first of all, most humans don't even hear below 20 hertz. And the voice doesn't really have any super duper low frequencies. So if we just cut these out, we're also cutting out any potential room hum that is unnecessary. We're just making sure we are definitely removing any totally unnecessary frequencies, right? So a good way to EQ is to listen with it done dramatically and then pull back until you hear the desired result. So I'm gonna cut like a lot of the lows. I know that's too much. And then I'm gonna pull back until I feel like it's not really doing anything anymore. And that's probably the sweet spot for where I wanna cut the lows out. So let's listen.
Where's it gonna go? Ooh, how we gonna make it?
And if you have a graphic EQ, this is so handy. It's showing me what frequencies I'm actually singing. So it's kind of like cheating to me. The original OG, let's pull up the OG stock EQ, which I use a lot still. Is the EQ 7 band by Pro Tools, I think. I think it's just Pro Tools. Looks very similar, but instead of when I click on one dot, the parameters pop up, it's always showing all of them. So we're limited to this many bands. You can't add additional dots. You can click the in button to hide it if you're like, I just don't even want to see them. You can turn all of them off. And in this particular plugin, there are 2 over here that are not in by default. You have to turn them on if you want it on. So this is that low cut. Okay. And I'm going to turn the Q up so it's a little steeper of a hill. And I'm going to put it probably around there. I tend to need a little reduction around this frequency. And then I usually need a boost of some highs, give it a little sparkle. And then I'm going to get rid of those annoying resonant frequencies. So let's do this in real time. Let's see what sounds good.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go? Mama, ooh, how we gonna make it through it? Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Okay, I lied. I don't know. Maybe it's my headphones. These are cheap headphones, but it sounds to me like it already is kind of very high frequency heavy. So I'm actually going to boost a little bit of my mids. I want to find that annoying resonant frequency. And so let me teach you my silly little search and destroy method. I'm going to make my Q notch style. And then what I'm going to do is pull it all the way up. So I'm going to boost the annoying frequency. And then when it sounds crazy loud, I know I found it. So check it out.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go? Mama, ooh, how we gonna make it through it? Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Found it.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Do you hear? It's kind of like a ringing resonance. So yeah, basically that is just an annoying frequency in my voice. And so I'm going to notch it out. Not too much. Because keep in mind, even though it's very narrow, it's still cutting out a little on the sides. I still want some of this frequency to be heard. So we don't just want it gone. So I don't want to pull it all the way down. And then I think my high frequencies are high enough, so I don't need to boost too much. So I think around right there is good. I mean, look how simple this setup. Like, don't do surgery on your voice. Like, less is more. So this is my settings. It's probably a good place to start for your voice as well. But if you have a more mid-range heavy voice, you might actually want to pull it down just a little bit. Just a little bit. Don't do anything too crazy. All right, moving down my vocal chain, I've got something called a gate. And this is something I only put on sometimes. If you feel like you have some unwanted room noise, a gate is your friend. How a gate works is basically low volume noises aren't allowed to be heard. Any frequencies that are below 40 dB, they're not going to be able to be heard. We're gonna shut the gate on them, and we're not going to let them pass through the gate if they're too quiet. So basically, it's saying, I know you're not a voice. I'm not letting you be heard. So only vocals can get through. If we turn this on, you can watch it happening in real time.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
So you see it really working between words. When it's like, okay, she's not singing, we don't need to let any sound in. That's what it's going to do. It's going to turn it down. I really love the C1 gate by Waves. I always just use the perfect voiceover gate. It literally is perfect. It's not too intense. One way that things can go very wrong with a gate is if, for example, you let a little air out at the end of your word, it might silence that air that you actually want to be heard. So if it's too aggressive with your gate, meaning you're saying like negative 20 decibels and below is not allowed through, it's going to sound like this.
Whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
So it's like suffocating it, and it's definitely not letting like the tail ends of words through. So if it's sounding a little like it's clipping off the ends of words, I would soften this and turn it down. So like anything that's below 40 or 50 dB can't come through, but anything above 40, 50 dB can come through. So only use that if you feel like you need it. I'm going to turn it off. I don't think I need it in this song. And then next is my classic compressor. So this is the Waves CLA2A. As you can see, I love Waves. Waves plugins are hella affordable. They're always having like buy one, get one frees. So check out Waves for sure. I love them for their mixing plugins. So they're like vocal chain type plugins. All right, so a compressor. Let's talk about it. What is a compressor? What a compressor really wants to do is prevent your sound from distorting or clipping. If you're getting a little loud, it's going to turn you down. And if you're too quiet, it might turn you up as well. That would be called an expander, but most compressors just do both functions. So I've got just the Vox preset. Sometimes I use a sibilant Vox if I'm singing like maybe falsetto. I think that sometimes I have a lot of air on my Vox, so I'll do this one. And then, mind you, a lot of compressors, actually a lot of plugins in general, have this sneaky setting, and I hate it, called analog. If it has the analog setting on, it's adding this vintage hiss on purpose. I don't want that. Do you want that? No. I always set it to off. The main Vox preset has 60 hertz on, so I know that I go and I turn it off because I don't need extra hiss. We're modern. So honestly, I usually just leave the preset as is. Sometimes I might listen to what it sounds like if I turn this up or down, just like in little increments. I find that sometimes turning it down gives it a little more of a slammed feeling, which is really popular in EDM music. So you might want to slam it a little bit more. I'm going to give you a cool bonus. Compression is like really a big topic. So if you took my Learn to Record course, you've already seen this, but I'm going to add it into the portal here as well. I had an amazing chat with Sam Canuck of Sam's Recording Academy, and we talk all about compression for an hour. So check out the class on compression if you want a deeper dive. But yeah, for the most part, it's just turning it up and turning it down. And I really am just, I love presets. They always work really well for me. Next to my chain, I like to use a limiter. A limiter is kind of doing the same. It's basically saying, like, if you reach this ceiling, you're not allowed to be louder than that. However, if you turn the threshold down, it makes the sound louder. So I basically use limiters as a loudness cheat. So I'm going to turn this on. So first of all, let me play it with it off, and then I'll turn it on, and then I'll show you what it sounds like when I turn the threshold up.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Hey, she's loud. Okay, so loudness is important. If you're listening on Spotify and you hear like a famous song and then you put it in a playlist next to your song, is your song like way quieter than theirs? It's because they've mastered their song in a way to make it louder. So first, I just like to make the vocal itself a little louder, and then I'm also going to add a limiter when we get to the mastering phase so I can make the overall song louder as well. And then I love this plugin called Vocal Rider by Waves. It's fun because you get to watch it do its thing automatically. It's like an automatic gain stager fader, so you can see it in action.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Yeah, so did you notice that like when I'm singing right here, the fader is kind of chilling in the middle, but when I go on those louder spots, the fader is turning me down. So I'm getting a real like level sound. So this is like my last defense to make sure that every word is heard and words that are too loud are turned down.
Mama, whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
Very cool. That is what's on my vocal chain at all times. This was just our stereo widener that we were playing with the other day. We don't need it. But I want to show you one more plugin that I use sometimes. It really just depends on what I'm doing with my tone. Sometimes I'll hear more annoying frequencies that I don't like, and I'll employ this plugin called Soothe 2. So what Soothe 2 does is it turns down your annoying resonant frequencies whenever it hears it automatically. And they've got a huge catalog of presets. And funny enough, the one I reach to the most is called De-honk. I totally sound like a goose sometimes. That's probably me getting a little too nasally on my louder stuff where I'm belting. So as you can see, our treble frequencies are probably going to be between like the 800 hertz area and like the 5,000-ish hertz area. That's where honking sounds come from. So I know this looks a lot like an EQ, and it is because it is affecting the frequency spectrum. But when I press play, you'll see even though these are pulled up, it's not going to pull those resonant frequencies up. It's actually going to push them down. So by me dragging these around, I'm going to say, hey, these are the ones that really need to be pushed down, and they're going to be pushed down harder. So it's kind of the opposite of the way an EQ works. So it looks like this.
Whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go? Whoa, how do we ever get this way? Where's it gonna go?
So yeah, you can see that it is turning down more in this range, which is what we found when we did our little search and destroy. Like, yeah, this is kind of the area where I'm really resonant. Check it out. They have a free trial, I believe, but I'm going to turn it off. I don't think it really needs it. Maybe it's my headphones, but I feel like the high frequency is just plenty, so I'm going to turn down even more. And then once I have my vocal chain set up for my leads, honestly, I will copy all of it over. So both leads are treated the exact same way. And then I'll also copy it to my backgrounds, but I might change a couple settings on the backgrounds. All right. So I'm going to open up the EQ. Background vocals are the support system, right? So one thing I will probably do is cut even more of the lows so it's more high-end heavy and let the lead vocals shine in the more mid area. So that's just a technique that I do. You might not want to do that. Totally up to you. You might want your backgrounds to be a little more sparkly. And then I'm going to make sure to copy my plugins over to the other background vocal chain as well. And here we go.
Ooh, how we gonna make it through it? What's it gonna take to do it?
Yeah, I love it. That sounds great.